And we are back, and it is time for the Else Views. This is the part of the show where me and Corey will talk about the things that we have been watching. Corey has a movie. I have a TV show. Corey, let's start with your movie because I don't want to sleep tonight.
Weird. Okay, I am on a hiatus from the other show that I do here on the network. You might have heard of it. It's called Adventure Park. No, wait, that's not me. Oh, God damn it!
It's called.
I keep trying so hard to be Brad, but it's called Pot Save the Queen. It's about the Queen of England smoking a bowl. No, I'm on a horror podcast here on the network called Podcast of Terror, and while we are on our seasonal break after the first 100 episodes, which are all available for you if you care to listen to them, it doesn't mean I get to completely ignore horror movies. I'm trying really hard not to watch a bunch of like horror films and stuff in the meanwhile, and it's difficult because I walk in the house and my wife's watching them all the time, so I have to go like duck my head in another room. But I don't always get a choice, and this past Friday I did not get a choice. It was announced quite a while before. When Stephen King's It comes out, we're going to see it opening weekend, and my wife set up getting tickets with a friend of hers from work. We went to our local theater that has I'm not sure that they were the D-box seats, but they were the electronic reclining seats. And certainly there were points in time where the sound shook the seats so much that it might as well have been D-box. I still can't hear out of my left ear all that well. We got together, we watched the movie on Friday night, and I've seen at least the first half of the It miniseries. I've never read the book. I think I've said this a couple of times before. The only Stephen King stuff I've read is like totally unlike the rest of the Stephen King stuff. I've read some of The Gunslinger almost to the end, but didn't quite finish it. I read, when I was a teenager, The Eyes of the Dragon, which everyone tells me is not like any other Stephen King book, but it does have Randall Flagg and aspects that tie into the rest of the universe. And then I read On Writing, because I'd like to write, and I'd like to be rich like Stephen King. Mostly because it's a pretty good book. But I have an understanding what it is. And I had a background because like I said, I'd seen the miniseries. This was a very, very good film. And in relation to other Stephen King films, it probably, at this moment in time, ranks as my favorite. And I'm a person who, like our friend Brandon from Mink Geek Studios, loves Maximum Overdrive, even though I know it's a shitty movie. I love Maximum Overdrive. I don't love The Shining because I'm not a big fan of Kubrick films, and it's really a Kubrick film more than it's a Stephen King film. I like Stand By Me a lot, and Stand By Me has a lot more in common with It than probably most other Stephen King films. Yes, there is a horror aspect to this movie, and it's certainly not something to ignore. And I saw Scott Johnson and Brian Ibbett today talking about how there were a bunch of 5 and 6 year olds in the theater when Scott went and saw it. And
why?
That is because sometimes people are dumb. When Aaron and I went on one of our earliest dates, we went to see the South Park movie, and there were a bunch of kids in the South Park movie. I'm like, this is not good. This is not the right thing to bring your kids to. It is also not the right thing to bring your kids to. But let's be clear about it. It is a coming-of-age story. It is about a group of kids, much like The Sandlot. If The Sandlot also included some, incestual molestation and edible 6-year-olds and just random scary clown shit.
Did you say edible 6-year-olds or
oh yeah. Well, I don't know how old the kid was, but somewhere around that age. That kid gets eaten. There's a lot of questionable themes that are in the book that don't get explored in the movie, but they're sidestepped in a respecting way to the original novel, but also realistic of it's not the 1970s anymore. That shit's not going to play up on screen. It's not going to work with today's audience, and it shouldn't work with today's audience. But the interaction of the kids and the actors who played the kids was impeccable. It was just fantastic. And I mean, from every point of it, from the writing to the kids acting. Now, a lot of people are making comments about Finn, who's on Stranger Things, and he plays a very different character in this than he does from Stranger Things. Like in this, he's really the comic relief kid. But they're all pretty funny in their own ways. But all the kids held their own in this, I think. You know, there are some that don't get explored as much, either due to circumstance of the story or just in general. It's like they're not the leaders of the group. They're not the ones who are going to be at the forefront of things. But it's still, overall, it is such an incredibly driving relationship-packed film. You love these kids. You feel connection to them. As far as being a horror movie, I saw a pretty not impressed review, and I don't know I agreed with it completely, but basically what the person said, it was that it's not scary. I think I saw a couple of people say that it's not scary. It's scary in a way, but it's not scary in the sense, like, if you're a horror movie fan, you've seen these things before. Because a lot of these things started with Stephen King doing the book in the 70s and then wound up being everywhere else. You know, the scary clown thing really started with it. People weren't scared of clowns before that. But you might have seen a lot of this stuff happen in other films since then. Kind of like we talked about with John Carter of Mars. The John Carter movie comes out and it's like, oh, nobody really was impressed with John Carter because they've seen all this shit before. Yeah, you've seen all this shit because it ripped off John Carter. But okay, I get that. But when it comes to the scares of this, when it comes to the creature that is it, and how it's scaring these children, it feels authentic to how children's fears would be played upon, not adults. You know, what scares you as a kid is not what scares you as a grown-up. And I think that's something that people aren't really catching in these reviews in particular. Because I'm not afraid of clowns like I would have been as a kid. It's still scary. It's still frightening to see it. And because the clown is not really a clown, it's scarier still. But it's not as impressive because I've seen fucking killer clowns from outer space. You know, they kill people, but they're funny. I've lived through the Freddy Krueger years. Like all these things that used to scare me as a kid. What am I afraid of now? Fucking mortgage company. Fucking Equifax getting hacked. Those kinds of things. It's a different world for me. You make it show up in the next film with the adults and it's somebody from the IRS. I'll fucking scream my fucking ass off and piss and run away hoping that you trip on my piss. I think it's authentic. I think what the movie really is, and I wasn't expecting it to be, is very authentic. There's such a great amount of humor to it that I also wasn't expecting. Like, honestly funny, but I also loved that it was a complete story. And in comparison to the book, as I understand it, the book intertwines the kid story with the adult story. The movie doesn't do that. And I don't remember the miniseries doing that much either. You see the kids come back in the second part, but the first part was really about the kids more. We don't know who's going to play the adults in this. I think that part of this was that they weren't expecting 100% if they were going to get to make the second chapter. So in the movie, you know nothing about the fact that this is a part one until the very end, when they start to do the closing credits. They say, "It, chapter 1." And then people were like, oh, you know, there were people who were definitely surprised by that in the theater when I went. Like, I can certainly see people would expect, after the movie's success this weekend in particular, that there might be a sequel. But I don't know that they knew that it was going to be automatically, there's a second chapter of this already announced in the film, because they might not be familiar with the, like I said, the book or the miniseries from before. This movie stands 100% on its own. It is a complete story. It is a great story. Is it the darkest horror film? No. But it's a really good horror film, especially if you're that age. The only problem is, if you're that age, there are some themes and definitely some language that may not be appropriate. So this is a parents, be aware of what this film is. Maybe watch it first to decide if your kid should watch it, and then watch it with them. But 5 or 6 is way too young, in my opinion. Although I would have watched it at 5 or 6 and had piss fucking nightmares for sure. Rubber sheets on the bed. I'm like all about that.
So my question for you then is, does it drop more or less F-bombs than you did in the last news story? Or this news story 2 news stories ago where
I gotta say, Finn has a good game. It's a good game. It's a fuck off between the two of us. Like, if we're both dropping F-bombs, it's a fuck off. I don't know who would win, but it would be damn interesting to watch. There's some good volleys going to happen in that fuck off.
All right. So my and I haven't seen it, so I couldn't interject anything myself. So, and that's partially because I'm not huge on horror movies, but like, it is one of those movies that I would see, but like I said, I think I said it in pre-show, at home on Netflix with the lights on, you know, in the middle of the day, just so it's like I'm like, there's no chance that the little kid that still is inside my head will not then take over and be like, all right, I am not taking a shower, or any of the horror movies. Like, thank God I'm in a 1-story house with no basement, no upstairs, because like half the stuff, like from the commercials, like there's the kid going down the stairs and the little kid's going, come play with me, come play with me, and then the clown comes up and like, haha, good thing I don't gotta deal with that shit.
You have to kind of be able to handle some jump scares, but that's all they are, and knowing that going in prepares you for it. And again, I'm coming at this from a guy who watches and reviews horror movies every week, and did for a couple of years, and am a horror movie person anyways. I can definitely say if you don't enjoy that kind of movie, then it might be a little tough. But there is so much else in this movie that I think that you would really like, that I think you should push yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that you will wind up enjoying it a lot more than you'll be freaked out by it.
Yeah. Again, like I said, probably won't see it in theaters because, again, especially if I tell my friends, hey, I'm going to see it, and they're like, oh, can we come? I'm like, fuck no, fucker. I know you're going to mess with me.
Beat is asking, does it beat Stand By Me? Obviously, I grew up with Stand By Me. I grew up with, I'm kind of named after Corey Feldman in a way. Will Wheaton and...
Well, darling, will you just stand by me? Well,
other than that song, I really like Stand By Me a lot. It's so familiar to what Stand By Me is. And like I was implying, The Sandlot. Stand By Me was an R-rated movie. And so a bunch of kids would want to see something like Stand By Me, but it wasn't really meant for kids. But then they did The Sandlot. And The Sandlot is like a family-friendly version of Stand By Me with a different backdrop, a different theme. But the kids and the way they all act around each other was very similar. It was similarly done. This is, again, like more of that. I can't remember if Stand By Me was written before it or not. But you can see, especially with Stephen King's writing, he follows the same themes a lot. He does the same things over and over again. There's always somebody in his stories who's a fucking writer. I hope he doesn't shit the bed on the ending in this like he does in everything else. But at this point in time, I enjoyed this more, but it's also new. It's new to me, and I've kind of got Stand By Me played out in my lifetime. I've seen it enough times. It's very good, but this was good in new ways, and that newness may make it feel more exciting at this point. It also helps that it's not a complete sausage fest, although it's close. There is a female lead in this, which Stand By Me does not really have. So it's just, in that case, it's just a boys movie, which is absolutely fine. This has a strong female character. In some cases, she might be considered the strongest character. I like that as well. The group dynamic is a little more varied than what Stand By Me was, because there were only 4 kids versus there's 7 in the Losers Club, I think. And the stakes are higher. The stakes are definitely higher. Stand By Me feels like it was written for people who weren't going to be able to get through the 1,200-page tome that it was. So here's a short story that kind of like cuts a lot of the meat off of it and just gives you a basic thing.
Oh, and sorry, Garley Bear has Stand By Me, a.k.a. The Body, which is the novella it was based off of, was from 82. It was released in 86.
Was it released in 86? I thought it was earlier than that.
That's according to Growley. I'm just like, I looked at the chat and I saw that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I will relay those.
Yeah, he's right. Okay. And that, I guess, kind of makes sense too, is you write a short story and then you enjoy the short story and you want to expand on it and make an actual book, a novel out of it, and explore those themes further and do something slightly different with it. Yeah, I can see that.
All right. My show that I've watched is one that actually Evan was asking if anyone had seen, because he was curious if we were going to talk about it. And I have, and it is the Orville. Now, this is the new Seth MacFarlane live action homage to Star Wars, or not Star Wars, Star Trek. I've got to say that I enjoyed the Orville. I think the casting is brilliant here with this. There's not really a person who seems to fuck it up in here. Well, with the exceptions of one of the times where they do fuck things up. but the pilot does suffer a little bit of pilotitis, especially with Seth MacFarlane and Adrian Palicki's characters. They play ex-husband and wife. You start the show with Seth walking in on her with this blue alien in their bed who is, I think, blowing her. And I don't know, there's like a little bit, it's a little bit of a funny moment there where she's like, "Oh, honey," and then he blew, like, apparently he orgasms from his face or something. And so he walks out, and a year later he's becomes the commander of a ship, and she signs on. She requests to be his first mate. And the awkwardness between the two of them, it's really fun, really clever. It only really suffers from the pilotitis at the end when they're wrapping things up, because in the beginning it seems like, or while you're watching all the events happen, from this like almost like a fucked up version of a Star Trek crew. Once they get done with the mission, then it's like, "Oh, well, I said I was only going to be on for this, and then we'll find you a new first mate. Well, here's this guy. He's really good. I think you should. I think he'd be a good fit for you. No, why don't you stay on?" Ugh, stupid pilotitis. Did you see this?
I watched it last night. I definitely felt that there was an air of pilotitis. My criticisms of it lean more towards it's not sure what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I think that it's been pitched very hard as being like the next Galaxy Quest. It's been pitched very hard that it is a spoof of Star Trek. I don't know that they went in either of those directions far enough. If it's supposed to be those things, it's not really funny. I was surprised at how limited the banter humor was in, like, was it actually funny? Like, there's a scene where they're talking to somebody, and in the background there's a dog licking itself. and the whole scene is like, you can't help but notice a dog licking itself. But then they have the two characters comment on, "Did you see the dog licking itself?" It's all I could look at. And that seems like it should be funny. And in Family Guy or American Dad, they would do it to make it funny. They would be able to film it that way. I don't know that the humor passes off in live action the same way. There's something in the way that Seth writes that for animation works pretty well to awesome. Like at the height of its goodness, both Family Guy and American Dad were great shows. We're well past that height now with both of those programs, although I still like American Dad more. But I think when he goes to live action, something doesn't quite click. And in this show, it's like there are moments that are supposed to be tense from the sci-fi aspect that could probably be a pretty good attempt at a science fiction show of a Starfleet type thing. But then all of a sudden they try to insert banter and like, "Oh, we're talking to the alien that's trying to kill us. Let's bring up our wedding woes yet again." And it just felt so forced and bullshitty.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like they were doing a good job of saying, "Oh, we're just doing it so we can distract him." It's like, it really was like somebody cut in the scene of like, we need to punch this up and make it funny. Like, I don't know if someone was like, "We're going to make the sci-fi show and it's going to be a serious sci-fi show." And if it was MacFarlane himself, and then someone else said, "But it's a Seth MacFarlane show. You have to make it funny, right?" "Oh, no, I wasn't really planning on doing that." Well, people have expectations of you on the show. And your smarmy ass can't be up there on screen and not make jokes, because otherwise people are just going to fucking hate you because you look like Peter Brady with a fucking stick up his own ass. And I love Seth MacFarlane in context, but I don't really love the, whatever. It really felt like it didn't know how to be funny, and it didn't know how to be a sci-fi show that was its own sci-fi show. And so it fell somewhere in a mushy middle where everything got mixed together. And it's not like corn and mashed potatoes where they mix together and it tastes really good. It was like brownies and beef stew, but they were shitty brownies, and it was kind of like rancid beef in the beef stew. Then neither of them would have even stood up well enough on their own.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I mean, I did feel like they were trying to go a little bit more serious, and I could see the point of, like, Seth was trying to do, gosh, I don't even know how, I think he was trying to go more Star Trek at first, and then they're like, "Well, wait, you're Seth MacFarlane," because he did create this. I believe he wrote the pilot, or he was one of the writers on the pilot. And then Jon Favreau directed it. So there were a couple scenes in there that I could pick out, that you're like, "Oh my God, that's true." That you seem like they were just punching up the stuff. I was just glad for a Seth MacFarlane show that didn't rely on cutaway gags. So, I mean, there is that.
Yeah, but
beats ass.
remember he did Dads too, and if that was, I can't remember if that's exactly the name of it, but that was one of his other live action shows that he wasn't actually in, but the humor of that didn't land at all either. And this wasn't quite that bad, but again, that show was going strictly for laughs, and this show goes through like, we're in the middle of a tense situation, here's an uncomfortable joke, back to tense situation, here's a joke just to give up the appearance that we're still funny. Scott Grimes is in this, and Scott Grimes plays Steve Smith, but Scott Grimes also is a very talented actor. You can go back to Critters, which is one of my favorite fucking horror movies, but when he was on ER and everything, he's got a lot of experience, but he's an honestly very funny guy, and the material they gave him was just shit. And then the whole, like, I'm chasing the donkey or whatever the fucking move that he's doing the whole time. It completely deflated the space battle scene that we were supposed to have. It was a stupid fucking joke at the same time. So it did absolutely nothing. And then we're supposed to feel tension when the away ship is supposed to be trying to get back on there. We felt no tension the entire time that they were fighting. It's like, oh, our shields are completely down now. So this entire thing that you're doing of like, we're going to just chase around the fucking bigger ship and just like keep avoiding it, and we're not even firing, has worked out to do nothing. It just really, it wasn't plotted well to be a good sci-fi show at that point. It really left me with a sense of, this is a huge misfire. Now, again, this is the first episode.
There is that, but I also think there might be some hidden motives between that, because it's a question that Beat asked earlier. So do you think Seth has enough clout to survive the Fox X? If you look at any sci-fi show that's been on Fox, it doesn't usually last more than a season, maybe 2. And there are some outliers on that, but it's one of these, like, you set it in this mushy middle between the two, between, like this, like a hard sci-fi or a comedy, strictly like comedy set in space. And then you can determine then which way you're going to lean. I think that could be what they're doing here. No, it is a risk because it's can turn off a lot of people, like it has. But
well, I just want to say, I think also the problem is that we had Galaxy Quest, and Galaxy Quest was phenomenal. And this show came out at a time when we were kind of anticipating, up until very recently, that we were going to get another Galaxy Quest, and then Alan Rickman passed away suddenly, and so it put a pall over that entire thing. And then there was still rumors that Galaxy Quest might come in as a TV program, either like a Next Generation thing or something else. And then we started seeing advertisements for the Orville, and I thought, well, at least this is going to be the replacement for Galaxy Quest, and in some way this is going to give us what the promise of Galaxy Quest was. And Galaxy Quest was really, really good, and this needed to land at least closer to that level.
But at the same thing, I don't know if, and Beat and Growly will have to do a little bit of research, I don't think Galaxy Quest was a big box office hit. I think it was definitely more of a cult hit movie.
That's Star Trek.
Well, yeah, okay, I know. But it's one of those things like here, could this be a thing of, are we discounting the Orville before it hits, where it could be really good, like episode 4 or 5 or whatever could be really good, and it take off from there. We just have to get through these, first little proof of concepts things, but everyone's like, oh no, I'm not, I'm done with that. I'm gonna go back to Walking Dead or, whatever TV show that's been on for 8 years and they know is safe, sort of thing.
Beat is saying Galaxy Quest made $71 million. I'm seeing that it made $90.7 million. Now that may be a difference between domestic versus worldwide. So $91 million approximately worldwide in 1999. Now how that stacks up to other films of that year, I'm not sure. And
what was their? Do you know what their budget was? Because that would be a big part. Like if their budget was 50 mil, then it's a success or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
45. Beat saying 45. So yeah, okay. It was a success in theaters, nationwide, because where it almost made double its money, back. But I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm an optimist, when it comes to TV, I'm willing to sit through stuff until I'm just like, what, I'm done with it. Some of the shows are really quick for that to happen. Gotham, I think it was 4 episodes, like 4 or 5 episodes, and I was like, I'm out. This isn't for me. This isn't what you promised me when you did all the advertising. So bye. I enjoyed the show. I
would give it a second episode.
Yeah,
I'm watch it again.
I'll go further. I'm probably going to give it 5, maybe 6 episodes because there was enough stuff there. And in all honesty, if this replaces Family Guy and it won't replace Simpsons, but if it'll do something with that Sunday animation domination, whatever the fuck they're going to call that time slot, I'm more than happy. I'll tell you right now, I would much rather see the Orville than any new Family Guy episodes.
It's kind of, I'm not loving Family Guy and have him for the last couple of years, but it's still, every once in a while it can still pull off a funny episode, and it's a bit more comforting. It's a comfort thing. I'm familiar with it, and so it's easy to get into it. Plus the fact that it's animated, they can do more ridiculous things. I do want to say the quality of this show, like the alien design and the costumes and everything, looks really good. And that's kind of the bummer, is that you can see that there is a lot put into this, but one, it feels too long in an hour. It just seems like an hour is not necessary, because we get repeated things like the interaction between Scott Grimes as Gordon and Adrian Palicki as Kelly. The whole scene of them out in the hallway, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I was just telling the gang about you and saying all these nice things about you." That whole scene just seemed so unnecessary. Didn't add anything to either the plot, or it just kind of restated stuff. It was like when they had the addition of Jabba the Hutt in the recut version of Star Wars of A New Hope, and it's like, hey, I'm going to tell you all the stuff that was just said in the last fucking scene over again, except now you get to see Jabba the Hutt walking around. In this case, Jabba the Hutt was Scott Grimes. It just it felt so tacked on, and like, because we have to hit our hour, and there was a little bit too much of that. So I wish it was shorter, and I don't know. I hope that it finds its voice, because there are some very good people on it, and there's something there that I think could be built on. I just hope that they've got the right people behind the scenes to hone in on that.
Yeah, I will also point out that from seeing the trailers and when it first came out, I was completely like, oh, poo on it, and the pilot won me over. So it in all honesty probably did its job.
Yeah, my expectations were probably higher than yours going in, and so I had to lower them, and your expectations were low going in, and it heightened them. Yeah,
because I've been, oh gosh, how many seasons is Family Guy on?
No, I don't know.
Like 12 or something. Like, I think I've been around the same time as The Simpsons, where, it's like, since we've been doing this, this podcast stuff together, where I've been like, just, nope, not a fan of American Dad. Like, Cleveland Show was the last one that I really liked and was sad to see that go. And it's one of those, like, now it's just like, I'm sort of done.
16, we're going under the 16th season of Family Guy, because remember, it had that lengthy break.
I'd probably honestly have about 9, maybe 10 years, 10 seasons or so. It seems like it's been a long time since I've really sat down and watched week after week Family Guy. Like, that's usually the show. Like, I'm like, all right, American Dad's on next. All right, what's on Disney Channel that I can watch for a half hour? All right, I'm gonna watch that. All right, that show's over. Okay, turn back. It's time for American Dad, or not American Dad. Bob's Burgers.
Yeah, Bob's Burgers kind of crushes all of them.
That is going to do it for the ElseViews, and we will be right back.
Hi. Hello. Making a promo is hard. Hey, this is Brad Ludwig from the Adventure Party podcast. Every Sunday we talk about board games, card games, role-playing games, reindeer games. Co-host, friend, game designer, and gaming store manager Glenn Bittner reviews a game each week and recommends something to add to your library or game closet setup thing. Our Kickstarter spotlight shines on a game you should back with your hard-earned cash. We've picked successfully backed projects about 95% of the time. I really thought that airport board game from Russia was gonna fly. I shot that percentage right in the... We also chat with people who work in the game industry, or we pick an important topic that deals with some aspect of gaming. We welcome you to the Adventure Party.
For more on this Galactic Network podcast, go to gncast.com. That's GNCASTS.com.